It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Breaking news tonight. We understand that Maccabi Tel Aviv will not now sell tickets to its fans for a controversial game against Aston Villa. Also this evening, a palace source tells Sky News the royal family believes allegations against Prince Andrew should be examined in the proper and fullest ways. The king makes no mention of his brother as he visits the scene of the Manchester synagogue attack. Police say they will no longer investigate non-hate crime incidents after charges are dropped against Graham Linehan over trans-critical tweets. Donald Trump is upbeat about the prospect of a ceasefire for Ukraine, as the UK says it's preparing for the possible deployment of British troops to support any peace deal. Security staff at the Louvre tell Sky News they repeatedly warned of poor equipment and staff cuts before yesterday's jewellery heist. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That is coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Well, hello, good evening. We begin with breaking news. The Israeli football club Maccabi Tel Aviv has decided not to sell tickets to its fans for next month's controversial game against Aston Villa. A ban announced last week by authorities in Birmingham on Maccabi supporters prompted a political outcry, with the government putting pressure on local leaders to reverse the decision. Well, let's bring in our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who is here. Certainly controversy and debate here in the UK, but a decision taken this evening by or in Tel Aviv. What have you learned? Yes,
Maccabi Tel Aviv deciding to put an end to this. Sky News learnt that regardless of whether this ban on tickets being sold to the Israeli fans would be overturned, Maccabi Tel Aviv would not sell tickets anyway. It has been a fraught debate, this, over this Aston Villa match. It's pitted Westminster politicians against the authorities in Birmingham, created a diplomatic incident as well, and it's all played into concerns about the safety of Jewish people in this country. Now, Maccabi Tel Aviv have issued a statement which reflects some of that. They say, as a result of the hate-filled falsehoods, a toxic atmosphere has been created which makes the safety of our fans wishing to attend very much in doubt. Inflammatory rhetoric, trafficking in harsh truths is never healthy, but in this particular case, the remarks being generated are of the most concerning variety, not for Maccabi Tel Aviv or football, but for the sake of society and its underlying values. Maybe the agendas involved here should be looked at more closely. And Maccabi Tel Aviv saying that the well-being and safety of their fans is paramount, and that's why they've decided not to take up this allocation. Earlier in the House of Commons, the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, talked about the risk assessment by West Midlands Police and Birmingham City Council. That's the one that said that they did not want Israeli fans coming to this match at the start of November. And Lisa Nandy said that the decision to ban Israeli fans was in part because of the risk posed to those fans who support Maccabi Tel Aviv and are Israeli and Jewish. And this is what created such concern for the government, the fact a whole section of society was being excluded over fears they could be the target. And this fixture, while there might not be any Israeli fans there, could still well be the target of pro-Palestinian protests, pro-Israeli protests as well, which could create a big security challenge. Rob, bring us that breaking news. Thank you. Now, the royal family is further distancing itself from Prince Andrew hours before the publication of a posthumous memoir by Virginia Giuffre, who accused him of sexual assault. A palace source has told Sky News that the royals believe allegations against Andrew should be examined in the proper and fullest ways. On Friday, Andrew revealed that he was relinquishing the use of his royal titles and honours. He denied any wrongdoing, saying the accusations against him were distracting from the work of the king. Our royal correspondent, Rhianna Mills, has this report.
If they'd hoped the statement on Friday would draw a line under the Prince Andrew and Epstein scandal, this book by his accuser, appearing in shops early, has ruined that. The claims of Virginia Giuffre, released even after her death by suicide, now available for a global audience to read. Claims the palace are not ignoring. With a Buckingham Palace source telling me the new allegations that emerged this weekend are being viewed with very serious and grave concerns, with the royal family believing they should be examined in the proper and fullest ways. Allegations that Prince Andrew continues to vehemently deny. It comes after reports that claimed Prince Andrew asked a royal protection officer to dig up dirt on Virginia Giuffre in 2011, the woman who accused the prince of sexual abuse. The Metropolitan Police said they are actively looking into the claims. While it is morally wrong, Andrew would also potentially have been asking his police officer to put his career on the line by unlawfully trying to access information. There's no doubt that the release of this book was one of the reasons why we saw such a dramatic statement on Friday. And talking to palace sources, they told me it was really seen as the swiftest way of achieving a necessary outcome. But the problem around this story is so much interest still lingers around it, and there are some who still think the royal family have not gone far enough. With questions about the use of his titles. Yes, his statement said he's not going to use them in public, but it doesn't mean he's been completely stripped of them, and there's calls for that to happen. It would take an act of Parliament to remove his Duke of York title and other peerages, but it is possible the King could take away his honours, such as Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order or his membership of the Order of the Garter.
There are always routes for parliamentarians to put forward debates, to find time for debates, if that's what backbench MPs would wish to do. But I think we've seen the right course of action in terms of what the royal family have done so far. But the title of Prince is a title that's held by virtue of being the son of a monarch.
The whole thing for the royal family has been a huge distraction to both their work supporting survivors of sexual violence and wider visits to celebrate and reach out to other communities. Virginia Giuffre's book wasn't meant to be released until Tuesday, but we found 2 copies in a shop in central London. The early release guaranteeing another day of worldwide headlines and further uncomfortable reading for the royal family. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Well, the King didn't mention his brother Andrew today as he visited the scene of this month's fatal attack on a synagogue in Manchester. Buckingham Palace says His Majesty wanted to focus on the community impacted by the attack rather than any other matters. Our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, reports.
Just yards away from where 18 days ago terror struck, this was a visit to show support for the Jewish community. Greeted by the rabbi, Daniel Walker, who, like so many, did so much to keep the attacker out of this synagogue. The wall of flowers, a memorial to those who didn't survive. Inside, the King met the chief rabbi and community leaders, and those who were there on that day, among them Yoni Finley, one of those who was injured as he tried to barricade the doors. This is the first time he has spoken publicly about that day.
I know I'm lucky. We didn't all make it, and those are the real heroes. I didn't do what anybody else wouldn't have done. But we've got a great community. Everyone's been very supportive. 3 weeks ago, I saw the worst of humanity, but since then, you do absolutely see the best. And there's a lot of good people out there. It's scary when people are going to the synagogue and just want to go about their daily lives and, do the prayers. You shouldn't be scared to go to the synagogue. It shouldn't happen, absolutely. And it's scary that one person decides, and he wasn't apparently on, any watch list. You didn't know about him, and he decided that that's what he wanted to do. And like I say, you see the worst of humanity, and people shouldn't have to live their lives like that.
Those who were lost that day, 66-year-old Melvin Kravitz and 53-year-old Adrian Dolby. The gratitude of this community for the King's visit was clear as he left.
No pushing, please, thank you. No pushing, thank you.
Across the road for an impromptu walkabout to meet some of those who'd braved a Manchester downpour to see him. The King later met some of the emergency services who responded on that day, hearing from police, fire and ambulance crews about their experience.
So were you delivering first aid and things like that?
Yeah, an occupation.
There is still a rawness and an anger in this community that their warnings weren't listened to. In January, the King had talked of the dangerous re-emergence of anti-Semitism in the world. Today he saw where that took a terrible human toll.
Thank you so much that you came, Your Majesty.
Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
The Metropolitan Police said tonight that it would no longer investigate what it called non-crime hate incidents. The decision comes after the CPS said the Father Ted creator Graham Linehan will face no further action after being arrested at Heathrow Airport in September on suspicion of inciting violence over social media posts about trans issues. Well, let's bring in Sky's Molly Malone. So how significant then is this decision, Molly?
Well, I think potentially pretty significant. It's the largest police force in the country. Essentially, the police are saying that they'll no longer investigate non-crime hate incidents, that the aim really is less ambiguity, potentially clearer direction for officers. But just in terms of what it means, so a non-crime hate incident might be considered not to be a criminal offence, but still potentially perceived to be motivated by hatred towards someone's protected characteristics. So that's perhaps their race or their gender. Important to say they will still be logging these non-crime hate incidents. So if there becomes a kind of pattern of behaviour, then they can pick up on it. They will also investigate what are deemed to be hate crime incidents. So that's potentially someone deemed to be committing a criminal offence, so inciting violence. So that's the kind of distinction. The timing is somewhat crucial. After they announced today they will no longer be taking further legal action against the comedian Father Ted creator Graham Linehan after he was arrested back in September at Heathrow Airport for comments that he made on social media about trans issues. It was a very high-profile case. It drew the attention of lots of commentators and really specifically about the way that comments were policed. Perhaps some saw it as policing free speech, but the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, at the time saying that the police needed to focus on what he said were the most serious issues. So today, perhaps an attempt to try and satisfy those demands. We have had a statement from the Met. They said, "We understand the concern around this case. The Commissioner has been clear. He doesn't believe officers should be policing toxic culture war debates with current laws and rules on inciting violence online, leaving them in an impossible position. As a result, the Met will no longer investigate non-crime hate incidents. We believe this will provide clearer direction for officers, reduce ambiguity and enable them to focus on matters that meet the threshold for criminal investigation." So it seems like this is the Met Commissioner, Mark Rowley, who took issue with the issue at the time with surrounding Graham Linehan, trying to, I guess, protect officers from what he's called toxic culture war debates and actually focus their direction on criminal, in his words, investigations.
Molly, thank you. Now, the UK Defence Secretary says the UK is preparing for the possible deployment of British troops to Ukraine in support of any peace agreement. John Healey told our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes that Britain wanted to play a key role in Ukraine's future.
You say that you're accelerating millions of pounds of funding to prepare for any possible deployments to Ukraine, and you're reviewing readiness levels. Can you just give a bit more detail on that? Like what scale of money, what size of force, and would they be ready to deploy in 2 weeks, let's say, if Donald Trump manages to secure this peace deal in Hungary?
Peace is possible, and if President Trump can broker a peace, then we will be ready to help secure that peace for the long term. That requires us to invest and prepare our forces to be ready to deploy. Keir Starmer has said, if necessary, he's willing to see UK boots on the ground in Ukraine. And I've accelerated already millions of pounds in that preparation for any possible deployment in the event of peace. And I would expect the cost of that to be well over £100 million.
Well, earlier, President Trump said he was optimistic about the prospect of an end to the war in Ukraine. He was speaking after Ukraine's president said he would be prepared to meet Russia's Vladimir Putin at a summit with Mr. Trump in Hungary.
I've settled 8 wars in 8 months. Not bad. I have 1 more to go. It's Russia-Ukraine, and I think we'll get there, but it's turned out to be nasty because you have 2 leaders that truly hate each other. You know, you can't have it all, right? They hate each other beyond all else, and it makes it actually a little bit difficult.
Well, our US correspondent David Blevins joins us now from Washington. An upbeat President Trump there, David, but is a deal on the cards?
I think it may be more strategy than optimism from the President of the United States, creating the impression that a deal is within reach in the hope of bouncing the two sides into one. But right now, Russia and Ukraine seem as far apart as ever. When President Zelensky emerged from his meeting with Donald Trump at the White House last Friday, he said it had been positive, but his demeanour said otherwise. So I wasn't at all surprised to read reports today that that meeting had descended into a blazing row, because, of course, Zelensky came to Washington seeking Tomahawk cruise missiles. He didn't get them, partly because Trump had asked Putin's opinion on giving them to Ukraine the previous day. And then within the space of a month, President Trump had moved from suggesting that Ukraine could win back all of the territory it's lost to suggesting that Ukraine should just surrender that territory to secure a deal. That would have left Zelensky feeling isolated and may explain why he went straight into a call with his European allies, and now he will meet them again on Friday. The Kremlin, interestingly, describes those European allies as UK and EU warmongers. That's because right now they may be the only thing standing in the way of a deal that's done on President Putin's terms.
David, in Washington, thank you. Hamas says it returned the body of an Israeli hostage under the terms of the Gaza peace deal. The agreement has been under pressure following a flare-up of violence in recent days, with senior US officials arriving in Israel today to try to shore up the ceasefire. Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons, who joins us from Jerusalem, showing real concern, you might say, by the Americans, Adam, about this deal and how it survives the coming days.
Exactly, because this ceasefire is so tied to Donald Trump and to his administration that the Americans want it to succeed. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, he has under pressure to buckle against this ceasefire deal, but he really only has one big diplomatic friend in the world, and that's Donald Trump. So at the moment, this ceasefire is probably backed up by the desire of the Americans, and the cavalry has already come here. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner arrived in Israel today. They had a meeting with Mr. Netanyahu. Tomorrow, I understand they're going to be meeting hostages who were freed as part of this deal, and as they're doing that, J.D. Vance, the American Vice President, is on his way out here as well. So that is a very, very strong diplomatic presence. And I think they'll be saying to the Israelis, you need to make this deal work. Why? Well, look what happened yesterday with that big flare-up. Now, it followed on from 2 Israeli soldiers being killed by what the Israeli military says was an anti-tank missile fired at them. And in response, the Israeli military launched airstrikes, artillery, and killed dozens of Palestinians. They also said they were going to close crossings, they were going to stop humanitarian aid. And to many, I think, around the world, that looked like a disproportionate response. And I think that included the Americans. Hamas has sent a team to meet mediators in Cairo. We know that Arab states, Gulf states taking a keen interest in this. And of course, all those questions remain about what's going to happen in Gaza next. If we get through this first phase, how will it be rebuilt? Who's going to pay for that? Where will an international peacekeeping force come from? So many questions that are unresolved. But those really are questions that have been kicked into the long grass because this ceasefire is so fragile. There are those who are pushing Netanyahu to go back in and be tougher. The Americans here will say, make the ceasefire work. And the Israelis will say, well, Hamas have not returned all the bodies. The ceasefire says that it relies on their goodwill to make the best efforts to find and return those. And to that end, right now at the National Forensic Center, a coffin returned by Hamas is being checked to ensure that that is the body of another hostage. That would take us to nearly half of the deceased hostages. Still a long way to go, but that is progress.
Adam, live for us in Jerusalem. Thank you. A security worker at the Louvre has told Sky News that obsolete equipment and a drastic cut in staff meant that they'd reached the limit of what they could do to protect the world-famous museum. A manhunt is continuing for thieves who stole 8 jewels yesterday morning from the museum. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports now from Paris.
A day after a brazen daylight robbery, the doors of the Louvre remain closed.
I'm very, very sorry. You're very unlucky.
Disappointed visitors turned away as police continue to hunt the gang that robbed one of the world's most famous museums.
You can imagine it, you see it in the movies, very well thought, and this is something that happened in minutes.
I cannot believe it. I mean, unbelievable, like chainsaws. Like we were like from the United States and we could never even heard of such a thing.
Really disappointed. It was like a once in a lifetime to come see it, and now it's like a once in a lifetime that I'm not going to get to see it because the robbery is like once in a lifetime too.
It was around 9:30 on Sunday when thieves used this motorised ladder to access the first floor of the Louvre. Here, they smashed through windows and entered the Apollo Gallery, which houses French crown jewels. Inside, they grabbed treasures, including necklaces, earrings, and a tiara. They then fled on scooters after dropping this crown belonging to Empress Eugenie. Authorities believe this audacious heist was likely the work of an organised criminal gang, potentially stealing for a collector. But this crime has outraged many across France and left them wondering just how this could happen. In a radio interview, the Justice Minister said France had failed, questioning why the museum windows weren't secure and how the thieves could break in on a busy road.
Tomorrow and in the future.
Elise works in security at the Louvre. She says staff feared it was vulnerable.
All of us repeatedly warned about the difficulties we face every day at work. Equipment being in poor condition, sometimes even completely obsolete, coupled with a very drastic cut in staff. We inevitably reached the limit of what we could do to secure the building and its collections.
Police are desperately trying to track down the culprits before the treasures are lost.
A puppet like this is supposed to have a special charm or something, so it's kind of magic.
Alexandre Gicello auctions precious antiques. He says the robbers will need to shift the jewels fast.
To make a tour, if you want to take something about this, you've got to destroy them, to chop the stones, to melt the gold, and that's the disaster of this situation.
And catching the thieves is more than just solving a crime. It's about saving national treasures and this country's reputation. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Paris.
The national inquiry into grooming gangs has been dealt a blow with the resignation of a prominent survivor from its liaison panel. Fiona Goddard's resignation letter, which she has shared with Sky News, cites a toxic, fearful environment and condescending and controlling language used towards survivors. Well, our home editor, Jason Farrell, is here with me, and this inquiry, Jason, teetering before it's even begun.
Yes, and the Conservatives accusing Labour of sabotaging the inquiry. I wouldn't put it quite as strongly as that, but they seemed to have made quite a few errors in the build-up to it. I feel slightly sorry, I have to say, for Jim Gamble and Annie Hudson, who were the two people who were coming in as the potential chairs, because already it's been suggested really they're not up to the job. And actually, Jim Gamble, for example, is someone who has investigated this kind of thing. He actually is very independent when he's criticised the police, his own force in the past, and he has done a lot around investigating particularly child abuse. But he's not a judge. And the Conservatives would like a judge, and actually a lot of the victims also say that's what they want. But I think there's more to it than that. What we've seen in these letters from Fiona Goddard, but also from Ellie Reynolds, who's another survivor in Barrow, is that they both have this very similar experience of being condescended. Fiona talks about a toxic environment, condescending, controlling language. And then from Ellie Reynolds, she talks about being kept in the dark, treated with contempt, isolated. That is not a good way to treat your victims panel. And they're both saying it. And then the second big thing, apart from obviously not having concerns themselves around these chairs, is that they feel that the inquiry itself is being led down a different avenue. They get the sense that they're trying to broaden it, take it away from being purely focused on grooming gangs. And again, I don't think that's a particularly good look from the government if that is happening. I haven't seen evidence of that, but that's what I've heard people say is happening. I think Jim Gamble and Annie Hudson, if there's anyone left to consult, will go and do that tomorrow. They're going to meet what's left of the victims panel. They can sell their idea of what they would do as chairs, and then we'll see. It will be up to the government, it will be up to the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister to decide who leads this. But by God, they need someone to grasp it and lead it.
Jason, thank you. The first person to be convicted under the Online Safety Act for encouraging a child to self-harm has been sentenced to 20 years in jail. Carl Davis, who's from the Wirral, targeted the teenager online before meeting and abusing her in person. Katie Barnfield has more.
From the outside, Carl Davis led a normal life with his wife and children. But hidden from them all, he created a much darker world, where he groomed, manipulated and sexually abused a teenage girl. He's now the first person in the country jailed for encouraging a child to self-harm.
It's extremely concerning that Carl, by all accounts, is a family man. He holds down a full-time job, and then, you know, on the other side of it, online, he's a total different person and ultimately a monster online, exploiting a young girl to control her entire life.
The victim was just 13 when the grooming began. She was contacted on Discord by a boy called Ben, who said he was around the same age. They moved to Snapchat, where he started asking for pictures before other accounts became involved. At first, police thought the victim was being abused by 6 different men, until it became clear they were all Carl Davis, manipulating and blackmailing the girl. Sentencing him today, the judge, Hilary Manley, said he had humiliated, terrified and demeaned the girl, and his offending had plumbed new depths of abhorrent behaviour.
He then used these aliases as they were involved in criminality, they were dangerous men, dangerous offenders, putting the victim in a position where she was scared. And then him, as the contact offender, created this account called Mark. And Mark would sort of come in as sort of a saviour in terms of, oh, I'll tell that account to stop speaking to you, and things like that. Ultimately, they were all Carl, and this was just a sophisticated way of controlling a young girl.
After nearly a year of online grooming, last summer Carl began travelling from Liverpool to Stockport to abuse the victim in person. On one occasion, he brought a razor blade and told her to use it. A blade and a child's scrunchie were found by officers in his room.
He would pick her up from school, she'd be in a school uniform, they'd travel nearby 2 minutes away to a secluded spot, I believe it was a car park, and he would engage in sexual activity with her there. He encouraged her to self-harm in person as well.
Carl's wife began to suspect he was cheating. She called a number she'd found and a child picked up. When officers first met the victim, she told them nothing had happened. It took months to build trust with specialist social workers before she realised she had been abused.
There is a lot of cases that we have that begin online, that take place exclusively online. It is common to have, you know, young victims such as this. None of the cases that we deal with are easy, but when you have these kind of cases where there are, you know, extensive chat histories and photographs being shared back and forth of not only kind of sexual images, but also images of self-harm, it does take its toll.
Carl Davies has now been jailed for a total of 20 years for 17 offences against the same girl, including sexual activity with a child and encouraging his victim to self-harm. A landmark case exposing a hidden predator. Katie Barnfield, Sky News at Manchester Crown Court.
A major internet outage affected dozens of websites, online games and apps, including Amazon and Snapchat today. The problem was linked to an issue at Amazon Web Services on America's East Coast. The company says those underlying problems are now fixed and most of the service is back to normal. More than 1,200 workers at Pizza Hut are to be made redundant as the chain closes 68 restaurants and 11 delivery sites in the UK. 64 other sites are being bought by the US firm behind Pizza Hut's global operations, Yum Brands. That's after the firm's owner, DC London Pie Limited, fell into administration. The government has confirmed that university tuition fees in England will rise in line with inflation from next year. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, says maintenance loans will also rise in line with forecast inflation every academic year. But let's just bring you some breaking news we're getting from the States. And an American man who faked his death and fled to Scotland to try to escape a rape charge has been jailed in the US for at least 5 years. Nicholas Rossi is who we're talking about. He posed as Arthur Knight while he fought efforts to extradite him back to America. The victim in the case told the court in Utah shortly before Rossi was sentenced that Rossi had left a trail of fear, pain and destruction behind him. Now, a new microscopic implant is helping people who have lost their sight to see again in what experts say is a paradigm shift in artificial vision. The Prima device is half the thickness of a human hair and helps people who have lost their vision due to common but untreatable age-related conditions to read again. In a world-first trial, 38 patients in 5 countries were fitted with the implant, which allows them to see letters, numbers and words.
After the implantation, it takes about several months for them to understand this new vision. But the most important thing with this device, which has never been demonstrated before with any device, is that patients can see what we can see. So they can actually see letters, see words and numbers. So that is why it's making such an impact to patients. So after about 6 months, they're able to read books, start to enjoy the tasks that they normally do that have been lost because of blindness.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by The Times' chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Salma Shah. Welcome to both of you. Well, among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front page of The Guardian, featuring more allegations against Prince Andrew as Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir is released.